The Kansas dust still clung to Lydia Cather's worn traveling dress as the stagecoach lurched to a stop in Dust Hollow. 28 years old, with auburn hair pinned severely beneath a faded bonnet, she clutched the letter that had brought her west, her last hope after the scandal that had torn her family apart back home. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the unpaved main street, turning the air thick and oppressive. Lydia stepped down from the coach, her carpetbag heavy in her trembling hand. The letter from Nathaniel Crow promised honest work and a respectable marriage to a man who needed a wife capable of managing a small ranch. It wasn't romantic, but romance had never done her any favors. She paused to catch her breath, the familiar tightness already building in her chest. Not now, she prayed silently. She'd hidden her condition throughout the long journey from Kansas, timing her attacks for when the other passengers slept, or when she could excuse herself at way stations. The last thing she needed was to appear weak before she'd even met Mr. Crow. Dust Hollow sprawled before her like a sun-bleached skeleton. False-fronted buildings lined the street: the Silver Dollar Saloon, Henley's General Store, a barber shop, and what appeared to be a modest boarding house with peeling paint. Cowboys lounged in the shade, their spurs jangling as they shifted position to watch the newcomer. A few women in calico dresses hurried past, averting their eyes from the saloon. Lydia took a tentative step forward, then another. The weight of too many sleepless nights and meals of hardtack and water suddenly crashed over her. The street tilted. Her vision blurred at the edges. "No," she whispered, but her body betrayed her. The familiar vice grip seized her lungs. Each breath became a battle, a desperate wheeze that drew immediate attention. Her knees buckled. The carpetbag slipped from her fingers, spilling her few possessions onto the dusty street. A crowd began to gather, curious faces peering down at her as she gasped like a landed fish. What's wrong with her? Is she touched? Someone fetch Doc Harmon. Nah, he's drunk again. Lydia tried to speak, to explain, but no words came. Her corset, already loosened as much as decency allowed, still felt like iron bands around her ribs. She clawed at her throat, panic mixing with the physical distress. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She was supposed to arrive quietly, meet Mr. Crow, and begin her new life. The faces above her blurred together, a sea of strangers gawking at her shame. Some stepped back as if her condition might be catching. Others pressed closer, their morbid curiosity overcoming caution. Then the crowd parted. A man emerged from the shadows of the livery stable, moving with the measured stride of someone who never hurried, but always arrived in time. Tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by years of physical labor, he wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Lydia caught a glimpse of steel blue eyes and a jaw roughened by several days' worth of stubble. Without a word, he knelt beside her. Large, calloused hands slipped beneath her shoulders and knees, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. The crowd murmured, but the man paid them no mind. "Stand aside," he said quietly, and something in his tone made even the boldest gawkers step back. Lydia's world narrowed to the steady rhythm of his footsteps and the solid warmth of his chest. She tried to protest, to maintain some dignity, but another coughing fit stole what little breath she had. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and she caught the scent of leather, horse, and honest sweat. "Easy," he murmured the word, rumbling through his chest. "Don't fight it." The boarding house materialized around them, worn wooden floors, faded wallpaper, the lingering smell of lye soap and yesterday's stew. An older woman with steel-gray hair and knowing eyes directed them to a small room at the back. "Land's sakes, Cade Mercer," the woman said, already loosening the buttons at Lydia's throat. "What have you brought me now?" "Found her in the street, Ruth. Couldn't breathe." Ruth's experienced hands worked quickly, releasing Lydia from the worst of her restrictive clothing. "You can go now, Cade. This ain't proper." But Cade had already retreated to the doorway, his hat in his hands. "She traveling alone?" "Appears so. Had a carpetbag." Ruth glanced at him sharply. "Since when do you concern yourself with strangers?" He didn't answer, just set his hat back on his head. "Send word when she's recovered. Someone should know she's here." Lydia heard his boots retreat down the hallway. She wanted to call out to thank him, but the attack hadn't fully released its grip. Ruth helped her to the narrow bed, propping her up with thin pillows. "There now, child. Breathe slow. That's it." Ruth's voice held the authority of someone who'd seen too much to be easily rattled. "You've got the breathing sickness, haven't you? My youngest had it. Dust and heat make it worse." Tears leaked from Lydia's eyes. Of all the ways to arrive in a new town, this had to be the worst. By evening, everyone would know about the sickly woman who'd collapsed in the street. I'm here to meet someone," she managed between wheezes. "Nathaniel Crow." Ruth's busy hand stilled. A look passed over her weathered face, pity mixed with something else. "Oh, child." The tone sent ice through Lydia's veins. "What?" "Nathaniel Crow got married last month. Brought in a girl from Denver. Pretty little thing, healthy as a horse." Ruth resumed her ministrations, avoiding Lydia's eyes. "I'm surprised he didn't write to tell you not to come." The room spun again, but this time it had nothing to do with her breathing. Married. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. She'd sold everything, endured her family's final rejection, traveled hundreds of miles on the promise of a new life. I have his letter," she whispered. "I'm sure you do, child. But men like Nathaniel." Ruth shook her head. "Well, let's just say his word ain't worth the paper it's written on." Lydia closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Not here, not in front of this stranger. She'd shed enough tears in Kansas. This was supposed to be different. "What will I do?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Ruth patted her hand with surprising gentleness. "First you'll rest. Then we'll see. Dust Hollow ain't much, but there might be work for a woman willing to do it. Can you cook, sew?" "I can sew. I can keep books. I can—" Lydia's voice faltered. What could she do really in Kansas? She'd helped with her father's small business until the scandal broke. Until her brother's gambling debts had destroyed everything, and her father had blamed her for not stopping it, for not being a better influence. "Rest now," Ruth said firmly. "Tomorrow's troubles will keep." But as Ruth bustled out of the room, Lydia stared at the water-stained ceiling and wondered if tomorrow would bring anything but more shame. She'd fled Kansas as damaged goods. Now she'd arrived in Dust Hollow as something worse, a burden. Outside her window, she could hear the town continuing its daily rhythm. Horses clopped past. Men shouted to each other. Somewhere, a blacksmith's hammer rang against iron. Life went on indifferent to one woman's misfortune. Her breathing had finally eased, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that always followed an attack. She thought of the man who'd carried her, Cade Mercer, Ruth had called him. He'd lifted her from the dirt without question, without hesitation. When was the last time anyone had shown her such simple kindness? A bitter laugh escaped her. One act of decency didn't change her situation. She was alone, penniless and sick in a town that had no use for her. The letter that had promised salvation lay somewhere in the street, with her scattered belongings worthless as the man who'd written it. Lydia turned her face to the wall, finally letting the tears fall. She'd traveled so far, hoped so hard, but the West, it seemed, was just as cruel as the life she'd left behind. Only here she didn't even have the comfort of familiar surroundings. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting Dust Hollow in shades of gold and shadow, Lydia Cather closed her eyes and wondered if she'd made the worst mistake of her life, or if perhaps she'd had any real choice at all. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, painting dust motes golden in the air. Lydia woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar room and the lingering ache in her chest. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the journey, the attack, the devastating news about Nathaniel Crow. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ruth entered with a tray bearing coffee biscuits and a bowl of porridge. "Morning, child. How you feeling?" "Better, thank you." Lydia's voice came out hoarse. She pushed herself upright, smoothing her tangled hair with trembling fingers. I need to pay for the room." Ruth set the tray on the bedside table. "We'll discuss that later. Eat first. Can't think straight on an empty stomach." The coffee was bitter and strong, nothing like the weak tea she'd grown accustomed to during her journey. but it was hot and real, grounding her in this new reality. As she ate, Ruth busied herself straightening the room. "That Cade Mercer came by this morning," Ruth said casually, though her eyes were sharp. "Brought your carpet bag. Found it in the street yesterday. Everything's there, far as I can tell." Lydia's hand stilled on her coffee cup. "That was kind of him. Cade's not much for talk, but he does right by folks." Ruth paused at the window, peering out. "Owns the horse ranch just outside town. Breeds the finest quarter horses in 3 counties. Keeps to himself mostly." "Why did he help me?" Ruth turned her expression unreadable. "That's Cade's way. See something needs doing, he does it. Don't look for more meaning than that." But Lydia remembered the gentleness in his hands, the quiet command in his voice. In her experience, men didn't simply help without expecting something in return. "I need to thank him properly," she said. "If you must. His place is a half-mile north, big barn you can't miss." "But child," Ruth hesitated. "Cade Mercer's got his own shadows. Lost his wife 5 years back. Fever took her and their unborn baby. He don't much care for attachments." The warning was clear, but Lydia nearly laughed, as if she were in any position to form attachments. She was a burden, nothing more. After Ruth left, Lydia dressed in her least wrinkled dress, a faded blue calico that had seen better days. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a pale woman with shadows under her eyes and hair that refused to stay pinned. Not exactly the image of a capable ranch wife. She found her carpet bag by the door, everything intact as Ruth had said. Even the letter from Nathaniel was there, creased and travel-stained. She considered burning it, then tucked it away. Evidence of her foolishness, perhaps, but also proof that she'd tried to build something better. The morning air was already warming as she stepped onto the boardwalk. Dust Hollow looked different in daylight, less menacing, more weary. A few shopkeepers nodded as she passed, but most avoided eye contact. News of yesterday's spectacle had clearly made the rounds. The horse ranch sprawled at the town's edge corrals, filled with magnificent animals that tossed their heads and stamped in the dust. The barn Ruth had mentioned dominated the property, its doors thrown open to reveal a shadowy interior. Lydia paused at the entrance, suddenly uncertain. What did one say to a man who'd carried you from the street? Before she could decide, a figure emerged from the barn's depths. Cade Mercer looked different in full daylight. The shadow of his hat still obscured his eyes, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, the weathered quality of his skin that spoke of years under the harsh sun. He moved with an economy of motion, every gesture deliberate. He stopped when he saw her, a saddle balanced on his shoulder. "Miss Cather, you know my name." Ruth mentioned it. He set the saddle on a fence rail, his movements unhurried. "Feeling better?" "Yes, thank you. I came to thank you properly, for yesterday." He nodded once, then turned back to the saddle, checking its leather straps. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. "I heard about Crow," he said finally, not looking at her. "Man's a fool." The blunt assessment startled a laugh from her. "Perhaps it's for the best. A man who breaks his word so easily would have made a poor husband." Cade glanced at her, then those steel blue eyes assessing. "What will you do?" The question she'd been avoiding. "I don't know. I have little money, no connections here. I suppose I'll need to find work." "Can you work?" The directness should have offended her, but somehow it didn't. "I'm stronger than I look." "That's not what I asked." Lydia lifted her chin. "I can sew. I can keep books. I helped run my father's dry goods store before I left. I'm educated. I can read and write and figure sums." "But you get breathing attacks." "Sometimes. Not always. The dust makes it worse, but I can manage." He studied her for a long moment, then turned back to his work. Town doesn't have a steady seamstress. Women mend their own mostly, but the ranch hands and drifters need repairs. Might be work in that. Hope flickered in her chest. "Do you think—" "Talk to Ruth. She knows everyone can spread the word. Start small. Build trust." He hefted the saddle again. "This is a hard place, Miss Cather. It don't coddle the weak." "I'm not weak." The words came out fiercer than intended. Cade paused, really looking at her for the first time. Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, but a reassessment. "No," he said quietly. "I don't reckon you are." He disappeared back into the barn, clearly considering the conversation over. Lydia stood there a moment longer, watching horses move in their corrals, feeling oddly steadied by the encounter. On her walk back to town, she noticed things she'd missed before. The small church at the end of Main Street. A schoolhouse with children's voices spilling from its windows. Women hanging laundry behind their homes, creating brief rainbows of fabric against the drab landscape. This could be a life, she thought. Different from what she'd imagined, harder certainly, but still a life. Ruth was serving lunch to a handful of boarders when Lydia returned. The men, mostly older, mostly rough-looking, eyed her with curiosity, but said nothing. Ruth motioned her to a corner table. "Eat, then we'll talk about work." Over a meal of stew and cornbread, Ruth outlined possibilities. Martha Henderson might need help with her new baby. Sarah at the general store always complains about mending. And the Cowboys. She lowered her voice. They pay well for decent repair work. Rip their clothes something awful. I'll do whatever's needed. Ruth's approving nod was worth more than words. I've got a small room off the kitchen. Not much, but it's private. You can stay there in exchange for helping with meals and cleaning. That'll save your money for other needs. The generosity threatened to undo Lydia's composure. Why are you being so kind? Child, I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same lost feeling. Someone helped me then. Now I help you. That's how it works out here. We women look after each other or we don't survive. That afternoon, Lydia met her new life head on. She helped Ruth serve dinner, learning the boarders' names and preferences. She mended a torn tablecloth, her neat stitches earning Ruth's approval. When her chest tightened from the kitchen smoke, she stepped outside without fuss, breathing carefully until the sensation passed. As evening painted the sky purple and gold, she found herself on the boarding house's back step, watching the town settle into nighttime rhythms. Somewhere, a guitar played a mournful tune. Dogs barked in the distance, the ordinary sounds of life continuing. It's not what I planned, she said aloud. Plans. Ruth had joined her, wiping her hands on her apron. Lord laughs at our plans. You're here now, that's what matters. Mr. Mercer said this place doesn't coddle the weak. Cade said that, did he? Ruth snorted. Man ought to know he's survived worse than most. But he's wrong about one thing. You're not weak, child. You're just bent a little. Big difference between bent and broken. That night in her small room off the kitchen, Lydia unpacked her few belongings. Her mother's silver thimble, a book of poetry, the daguerreotype of her family before everything fell apart. She arranged them on the narrow shelf markers of the life she'd left behind. Tomorrow she'd begin building something new. It wouldn't be easy, nothing in Dust Hollow seemed easy, but it would be hers. And perhaps that was enough. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought again of Cade Mercer, the way he'd lifted her without hesitation, the way he'd spoken to her, direct but not unkind. Ruth had warned her about attachments, but surely gratitude wasn't the same thing. In the darkness, she whispered a prayer of thanks for Ruth's kindness, for Cade's intervention, for this chance at a different life. The West might not coddle the weak, but perhaps it had room for the determined. And Lydia Cather, despite everything, was determined to survive. 3 days passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and careful breathing. Lydia had fallen into Ruth's routine with desperate gratitude, but the weight of her uncertain future pressed against her ribs as surely as any corset. The few coins in her purse wouldn't last long, even with Ruth's generous arrangement. On the 4th morning, she made a decision. After helping serve breakfast to the boarders, she wrapped her mother's thimble in a handkerchief, pinned her hair as severely as possible, and walked to the edge of the town where Cade Mercer's ranch sprawled under the endless sky. She found him in the smaller barn, the one that housed equipment rather than horses. Leather straps and bridles hung from the walls, many showing wear and damage. He looked up from a torn saddle, his expression unreadable. Miss Cather, Mr. Mercer. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I need work. Ruth has been kind, but I won't be a charity case. He set down his tools, wiping his hands on a cloth. Told you to talk to the townswomen. I did. They were polite, but she swallowed her pride. They don't trust me yet. I'm an outsider who collapsed in the street. They need time to see I'm reliable. And you think I don't? I think you judge people by what they do, not what others say about them. A ghost of something maybe approval crossed his features. He gestured to the wall of damaged tack. Ranch hands are hard on equipment. I fix what I can, but the fine work. He shrugged. My hands are too big for detailed stitching. Lydia stepped closer, examining a bridle with torn decorative leather. The damage was extensive, but not irreparable. I could fix this. My father sold similar pieces. I know the stitching patterns. Show me. It wasn't a question. Lydia unwrapped her thimble, found a needle in her small sewing kit, and selected thread that nearly matched the leather. Her hands trembled slightly as she began aware of his scrutiny, but muscle memory took over. The familiar rhythm of needle through leather calmed her breathing. She worked for several minutes, creating tiny, even stitches that made the repair nearly invisible. When she looked up, Cade was watching her hands with surprising intensity. How much? He asked. What? For the repair. How much? She hadn't thought that far. Whatever you think is fair. That's not how business works. His tone was patient, but firm. You set a price. I pay it or negotiate. You can't survive here letting others decide your worth. The lesson stung because it was true. 20 cents for simple repairs, more for complex work. Fair. He pulled coins from his pocket, placing them on the workbench. There's more if you want it, but I won't have you working yourself sick. You stop when you need to breathe. No arguments. The kindness beneath the gruff words made her throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me. You're trading skill for money. Nothing more. But as she gathered several damaged pieces to take back to the boarding house, she caught him watching her with that same assessing look, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. Walking back to town, her arms full of leather and promise, Lydia felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving Kansas Purpose. Small as it was, she had work, real work that required her skills. The feeling lasted until she reached Main Street and saw Nathaniel Crow lounging outside the saloon. He hadn't changed much, still handsome in that careless way that had made her trust his letters. Sandy hair, easy smile, clothes that suggested money without quite achieving respectability. His new wife was nowhere in sight. He saw her at the same moment, and his face went through several expressions, surprise, guilt, and then something worse, amusement. Well, Lydia Cather. He pushed off from the wall, sauntering toward her. Heard you'd made it to town after all. She tried to pass, but he stepped into her path. The smell of whiskey clung to him, though it was barely noon. Nothing to say you were chattier in your letters, all those pretty words about building a life together. You're married. She kept her voice steady. There's nothing to discuss. Married. He laughed, the sound sharp. That's one way to put it. Sarah's father owns the bank. Couldn't pass that up, could I, though, between you and me? He leaned closer and she stepped back. She's not much for conversation, not like you. Excuse me. She tried again to move past him, but he caught her elbow. Not hard, but enough to stop her. Come now, don't be like that. Maybe we could... Take your hand off her. The voice came from behind Lydia, quiet, but carrying unmistakable threat. She didn't need to turn to know Cade Mercer stood there. Nathaniel's hand dropped. Just talking to an old friend, Mercer. No harm in that. Miss Cather. Cade moved beside her, not touching, but close enough that she felt the solid presence of him. Ruth is looking for you. A lie smoothly delivered. Lydia nodded. Of course. Good day, Mr. Crow. She walked away head high, aware of Cade following. They didn't speak until they were out of earshot. Thank you, she said quietly. Crow's a fool and a drunk. Stay clear of him. I have no intention of... His wife doesn't know about you, about the letters. Keep it that way. The implication hit her like cold water. You think I would... that I'd try to... She stopped walking, indignation flaring. I may have been foolish, Mr. Mercer, but I'm not without morals. He studied her face, then nodded. Good. Town's small. Gossip spreads like wildfire. You don't need that kind of trouble. They'd reached the boarding house. Lydia clutched the leather goods tighter, anger and embarrassment warring in her chest. I'm aware of my position here. I don't need reminding. Don't reckon you do. He touched his hat brim. Bring those pieces back when they're done. There's more work if you do them right. He was gone before she could respond, long strides taking him back toward his ranch. Lydia stood on the porch watching him go, emotions churning. In the space of minutes, she'd gone from hope to humiliation to what? She wasn't sure what to call the feeling Cade Mercer inspired. Ruth appeared in the doorway. Was that Nathaniel Crow bothering you? Mr. Mercer handled it. Ruth's knowing look was unsettling. Cade doesn't usually involve himself in town drama. Must have been passing by. But Lydia remembered how quickly he'd appeared, how smoothly he'd extracted her, like he'd been watching. The thought should have disturbed her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. That afternoon, she set up a workspace in the corner of Ruth's kitchen. The leather was quality material well worth saving. As she worked, Ruth's commentary provided background music. Nathaniel Crow's been trouble since he was a boy. His daddy had money from back east, bought respectability. But Nathaniel, she shook her head. Some men are born wanting what they can't have. He has a wife, a wealthy one from what he said. Poor Sarah. Sweet girl, but sheltered. Her father pushed the match. Probably doesn't know her husband's already got a wandering eye. Lydia focused on her stitching, disturbed by the thought of another woman trapped in a bad marriage. At least she'd been spared that. As evening approached, her pile of completed repairs grew. The work satisfied something deep in her, the transformation of damaged things into useful ones. Her breathing had stayed steady, only tightening once when the stove smoke grew thick. A knock at the back door interrupted her focus. Ruth opened it to reveal a young cowboy hat in hand. Begging pardon, ma'am. Heard there was a lady doing leather repairs. Ruth gestured to Lydia. What needs fixing? The boy, he couldn't have been more than 19, produced a worn gun belt. Split the stitching, can't afford a new one. Lydia examined the damage. Extensive, but fixable. 50 cents and I'll have it ready tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. Much obliged. He handed over the belt and coins, his relief evident. Word was already spreading. After he left, Ruth smiled. See, build trust one person at a time. Soon you'll have more work than you can handle. I hope so. Lydia stretched her fingers, already aching from the day's efforts. I need to pay you back for your kindness. Child, you're earning your keep. But if it eases your mind, we'll work out a fair rent once you're established. That night, Lydia lay in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling. Somewhere above, a boarder snored. Outside, a dog barked at shadows. Normal sounds of life continuing. She thought about the day's events. Nathaniel's unwanted attention, Cade's intervention, the growing pile of work that promised independence. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was taking shape. Her fingers found the repaired bridle in the darkness, tracing the invisible stitches. Tomorrow, she'd return it to Cade, collect her payment, and take on more work. One day at a time, one repair at a time, she'd build something solid in this unforgiving place. I won't be a burden, she whispered to the darkness. I won't. The vow settled into her bones as binding as any marriage promise. She'd come to Dust Hollow seeking one kind of life and found another entirely. But perhaps, just perhaps, it would be enough. The sandstorm rolled in from the west like a brown wall of fury, catching Dust Hollow off guard on what had started as a clear Tuesday afternoon. Lydia had been working in the small storage room behind Cade's main barn, surrounded by leather goods and the sharp smell of saddle soap. He'd given her the space a week ago, gruff as always. Can't have you walking back and forth in the heat. Work here when you need. She heard the wind pick up a low moan that quickly became a howl. Through the single window, she watched the sky turn from blue to sickly yellow to brown. Horses in the corrals whinnied nervously, pressing against the far rails. Then the storm hit properly and the world disappeared. Dust poured through every crack, every gap in the wooden walls. Within moments, the air became thick, unbreathable soup. Lydia grabbed her handkerchief, pressing it over her nose and mouth, but it wasn't enough. The familiar tightness seized her chest with vicious intensity. She stumbled toward the door, needing fresher air, but the wind slammed it shut as soon as she cracked it open. Dust devils danced across the yard. She couldn't see the main barn, couldn't see anything beyond a few feet. Her knees buckled. She went down hard beside a stack of saddle blankets, gasping like a landed fish. Each breath brought more dust coating her throat, filling her lungs. Panic mixed with physical distress, a dangerous combination she knew too well. The door burst open. Through tears and grit, she saw Cade's silhouette bandana over his face, fighting to close the door against the wind. "Lydia!" He dropped beside her, his hands surprisingly gentle as they lifted her shoulders. "Easy, easy. Don't fight it." But she couldn't help fighting. Her body demanded air that wouldn't come. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Without hesitation, Cade scooped her up. Even through her distress, she marveled at how easily he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. He carried her to the corner where saddle blankets made a makeshift barrier against the worst of the dust. "Listen to me!" His voice cut through her panic. "You're trying too hard. Small breaths, like sipping water, not gulping." He demonstrated exaggerating the motion so she could see despite the dim light. She tried to copy him, failed, tried again. His hand rubbed circles on her back, the pressure somehow helping her focus. "That's it. Small sips. The storm will pass." Minutes crawled by. Or maybe hours. Time lost meaning in the brown twilight. Gradually, agonizingly, her breathing eased from desperate gasps to ragged pulls to something approaching normal. The storm continued to rage, but they'd created a small pocket of relative calm. She became aware that she was essentially in Cade's lap, his arms around her, her head against his chest. She should have been mortified. Instead, she felt safe. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, a counterpoint to the chaos outside. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what you didn't call up the storm. For being weak. For—" "Stop." The word was quiet but firm. "You're not weak. You have a condition. There's a difference." She pulled back enough to look at his face. Dust had turned his dark hair gray, collected in the lines around his eyes. But those eyes, still that startling steel blue, held no judgment. Only concern. "My wife had something similar," he said suddenly. "Not the breathing sickness, but spells. People called her weak too. She wasn't—" It was the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned his wife. Lydia held very still, afraid to break whatever had prompted this revelation. "Margaret was the strongest woman I knew. Fought every day just to do what others took for granted. Taught me that strength isn't about what comes easy." His voice roughened. "It's about getting up each morning and trying again even when your body betrays you." What happened to her? Fever. 3 days and she was gone. The baby, too. He said it simply, but she felt the weight of grief in every word. Doctor said her constitution was already compromised. Fighting the sickness took everything she had. Lydia's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry." He looked down at their joined hands with something like surprise. "Long time ago now." Grief doesn't follow a calendar. No, it doesn't. He shifted, settling her more comfortably against the blankets while keeping one arm around her shoulders. "Storm's starting to ease. We'll wait it out." They sat in companionable silence as the wind gradually lost its fury. Lydia found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the bump in his nose that suggested an old break, the way his mouth held a naturally serious line. Not handsome in Nathaniel's easy way, but something better. Solid. Real. "Why did you give me the workspace?" she asked. "The truth." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I know what it's like to need something that's yours. After Margaret died, everyone wanted to help. Bring food, take care of things. Meant well, but—" He shrugged. "Sometimes you need to stand on your own feet, even if you're stumbling." "Yes." The word came out fierce with understanding. "Exactly that." His arm tightened slightly around her shoulders. Outside, the storm was definitely weakening. Soon they'd have to return to proper distance and behavior. But for now, in this dusty sanctuary, different rules seemed to apply. "I should probably find other work too." she said. Not just from you, to truly stand on my own. Probably should. Will you be offended? Why would I be your work's good? Others should benefit from it. He paused. Though I'll expect first claim on any repairs I need. Of course, she smiled, despite the dust still thick in the air. You were my first customer, after all. And I plan to be your best. There was something in the way he said it matter of fact, but weighted that made her breath catch for reasons having nothing to do with her condition. The door creaked open. Tom, one of Cade's ranch hands, peered in. Boss, you in here, we got. He stopped taking in the scene. Oh, storm's passing. Cade helped Lydia to her feet with careful hands. Check the horses, Tom. I'll be out directly. Tom disappeared quickly, but Lydia knew the damage was done. By evening, everyone would know that Cade Mercer had been found holding the seamstress woman during the storm. I should go, she said, brushing uselessly at her dust-covered dress. I'll walk you back. That's not necessary. It is. His tone brooked no argument. Streets will be full of debris. You need to watch your breathing. They emerged into a world transformed. Dust coated everything like brown snow. Tumbleweeds piled against buildings. A few townsfolk were already emerging, shaking their heads at the mess. The walk back was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. Cade's presence beside her felt solid protective without being overbearing. When they reached the boarding house, Ruth was on the porch, broom in hand. Her sharp eyes took in their dust-covered state, the protective way Cade stood beside Lydia. Something knowing flickered across her face. Bad storm was all she said. Lydia was working in the storage room when it hit. She had an attack. Ruth's expression softened. Come inside, child. I'll heat water for a bath. But Lydia turned back to Cade. Thank you for the shelter, for... She gestured helplessly, unable to find words for the comfort he'd provided. He nodded once. Rest tomorrow. Come back when you're ready. Then he was gone, striding back toward his ranch through the settling dust. Lydia watched until Ruth's gentle hand on her elbow guided her inside. So, Ruth said as she heated water. Cade Mercer. It's not what you're thinking. I'm thinking a good man helped you through a bad spell. Anything else? Ruth's expression was carefully neutral. Lydia remembered the solid warmth of his chest, the gentle circles rubbed on her back the way he'd shared his grief. No, nothing else. But as she soaked in the hot bath, washing away dust and the day's terror, she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. About strength not being what came easy. About needing to stand on your own feet even while stumbling. And about how for those stolen moments in the storm, she hadn't felt like a burden at all. She'd felt like someone worth protecting, someone worth knowing. The feeling terrified her almost as much as the breathless attacks. Because Cade Mercer, with his quiet strength and hidden depths, was exactly the kind of man she couldn't afford to want. Not when she was still building her life one repaired bridle at a time. But want him she did with a fierce ache that had nothing to do with her struggling lungs and everything to do with her foolish, stubborn heart. The talk started 3 days after the sandstorm whispers that followed Lydia through the streets like tumbleweeds. She'd be examining fabric at the general store, and conversations would halt. Women who'd begun warming to her grew cool again, their eyes holding questions and judgments. Pay them no mind, Ruth advised over breakfast. Small towns feed on gossip like cattle on grass. But it was harder to ignore when work began drying up. Mrs. Henderson suddenly didn't need help with the baby clothes. Sarah at the general store decided she could manage her own mending after all. Only the cowboys and drifters still brought their repairs, caring more about quality work than reputation. Lydia threw herself into the tasks that remained working until her fingers ached and her eyes burned from strain. If she couldn't have respectability, she'd have excellence. Each stitch became a small rebellion against those who'd written her off. She was bent over a particularly challenging saddle repair when Boots stopped outside her work area in Cade's barn. She knew without looking who stood there she'd learned to recognize his particular rhythm of movement. Heard you've been having trouble in town, Cade said without preamble. Nothing I can't handle. She didn't look up from her work. Mrs. Davies canceled her dress order. Now she did look up. "How did you?" She stopped. Of course he knew. Despite his isolation, Cade seemed aware of everything that happened in Dust Hollow. "It doesn't matter. I have enough work." "You have my work, and a few cowboys too proud to care about gossip." "Then that's enough." He moved into the room, his presence filling the small space. "It's not right. You've done nothing wrong. I am an unmarried woman who was found in a compromising position with the town's most eligible widower. In their minds, that's wrong enough. We were weathering a storm. You couldn't breathe." His frustration on her behalf sparked something warm in her chest, but she tamped it down. The truth rarely matters when there's a better story to tell. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Come to dinner Sunday, at the ranch." Lydia's needle slipped, pricking her finger. "What?" "Ruth, too, and Tom and his wife. Proper dinner with proper chaperones. Let them see there's nothing improper happening." "That would only fuel more speculation." "Or it might show them you're a respectable woman doing respectable work." His jaw set in that stubborn line she was learning to recognize. "Unless you'd prefer to hide like you've done something shameful." The challenge in his words made her spine straighten. "Fine, Sunday dinner, but only to prove a point." Something that might have been satisfaction flickered across his face. "Good. 4 o'clock. Ruth knows the way." He left before she could change her mind, taking with him that particular energy that always seemed to charge the air around him. Lydia stared at her work, wondering what she'd just agreed to. The news of the dinner invitation spread through Dust Hollow like wildfire, as Cade had surely known it would. By Saturday, Lydia couldn't walk down Main Street without feeling eyes on her, some curious others disapproving, a few almost envious. "Clever man," Ruth mused as she helped Lydia wash her hair. "Forces them to see you in a social setting, not just as the woman who collapsed or got caught in a storm. Or gives them more ammunition for gossip. Child, they'll gossip regardless. Might as well give them something true to talk about." Sunday arrived hot and still. Lydia dressed in her best dress, the green one she'd saved for special occasions that never came. Ruth had loaned her a cameo brooch, and she'd managed to tame her hair into something approaching elegance. Tom and his wife Martha collected them in the wagon. Martha, a plump woman with kind eyes, chattered the whole way about recipes and garden pests, clearly trying to ease the tension. Lydia appreciated the effort even as her chest tightened with each turn of the wheels. The ranch house surprised her. She'd expected something purely functional matching Cade's utilitarian nature. Instead, she found a home that spoke of care and history. A wide porch wrapped around the front chairs positioned to catch the evening breeze. Flowers, clearly tended by someone, bloomed in window boxes. "Margaret planted those," Martha whispered. "Cade maintains them just as she left them." The interior was simple but welcoming. Clean wooden floors, sturdy furniture, paintings of horses on the walls. It felt like a home waiting to be lived in again. Cade met them at the door, and Lydia nearly didn't recognize him. Gone were the work clothes and constant layer of dust. He wore a clean white shirt, dark trousers, and had obviously made an effort with his usually unruly hair. The transformation was unsettling. "Ladies, Tom, Martha, welcome." He gestured them inside with an ease that suggested he'd once done this regularly. "Dinner's nearly ready. Please sit." The meal was simple, but good roasted beef potatoes, green beans from Martha's garden, fresh bread. Cade proved a surprisingly capable host, keeping conversation flowing without forcing it. They talked about horses, the upcoming harvest, Martha's plans for a new chicken coop. Normal things, safe things, as if this were just a regular Sunday dinner among neighbors. Lydia found herself relaxing despite her earlier fears. This was what she'd imagined when she'd answered Nathaniel's advertisement, Sunday dinner's quiet conversation being part of a community. The irony that she was finding it here under such different circumstances wasn't lost on her. "Lydia's been doing fine work with the repairs," Cade said during a lull. "Best stitching I've seen since." He paused. "In years." "She fixed my Sunday gloves," Martha added. "You can't even tell where they were torn. It's like magic." Heat crept up Lydia's neck. "It's just practice and patience." Don't minimize your skills, Cade said quietly. Too many people willing to do that for you. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition. Ruth cleared her throat pointedly. This beef is excellent, Mr. Mercer. Your own cattle. The conversation resumed, but Lydia remained aware of Cade's presence, the way he ensured her glass stayed full, how he drew her into discussions without putting her on the spot. He was showing the town through Tom and Martha's witness that she was welcome here, protected. After dinner, they moved to the porch for coffee as the sun began its descent. The view stretched for miles, golden grassland punctuated by the dark shapes of grazing horses, beautiful in its vastness. Margaret loved this view, Cade said, appearing beside Lydia at the porch rail. The others were engaged in animated discussion about crop prices. Said it made her feel like she could breathe. I understand that feeling. The words slipped out before she could stop them. I know you do. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Don't let them drive you away, Lydia. The town, I mean. They're not bad people, just set in their ways. And if they never accept me, then they're fools. He said it simply like stating the weather. You're worth 10 of their approval. Her throat tightened for reasons having nothing to do with her condition. You hardly know me. I know enough. He gestured to the fading day. I know you work until your fingers bleed rather than accept charity. I know you face each day despite your body fighting you. I know you came here with hope had it crushed and chose to build something new instead of giving up. How do you know about hope? His smile was rueful. Because I recognize someone else who's had to rebuild from ashes. The moment stretched between them fragile and significant. Then Martha's laugh broke the spell, and Cade stepped back to proper distance. The ride home was quiet, everyone lost in their own thoughts. As they pulled up to the boarding house, Martha turned to Lydia. That was lovely. We should do it again sometime. I'd like that, Lydia said, surprised to find she meant it. Inside, Ruth helped her unpin the cameo. Well, it was nice, normal, like being a real person instead of the town curiosity. You are a real person, child. Some folks just need reminding. Ruth patted her shoulder. Cade Mercer's a good man. Ruth. I'm not suggesting anything, just observing. Man who hasn't entertained in 5 years suddenly throws a dinner party, makes a person think. But Lydia was trying very hard not to think. Not about the way Cade had looked in his Sunday clothes, or how his defense of her work had warmed her heart, or the moment on the porch when the space between them had hummed with possibility. She was building a life here, slowly but surely. She couldn't afford to complicate it with feelings for a man still grieving his wife, no matter how her foolish heart raced when he looked at her with those steady blue eyes. But that night, as she lay in her narrow bed, she allowed herself one small fantasy more. Sunday dinners, the porch view becoming familiar, Cade's rare smiles becoming less rare. A life not just rebuilt, but shared. Dangerous thinking for a woman in her position. But in the darkness, with no one to judge, she held the dream close as any repaired leather, stitching it carefully into her heart. The Sunday dinner had shifted something in Dust Hollow's perception. Not completely, Lydia still caught sideways glances and whispered conversations, but enough that a few more women brought their mending. She worked steadily, saving every penny, slowly building her small corner of independence. 3 weeks later, she finally had enough courage and funds to approach Ruth about renting the unused corner room at the front of the boarding house. I want to open a proper shop, she explained over morning coffee. Nothing grand, just a place where people can bring their work without having to trek out to Cade's ranch. Ruth's eyes sparkled. Been wondering when you'd ask. That room's been sitting empty for 2 years. We'll fix it up nice. They spent the next days transforming the space. Tom built simple shelves. Martha donated curtains, and even some of the previously cool townswomen offered furniture they weren't using. Lydia painted a modest sign, L. Cather, Repairs and Alterations. Cade arrived as she was hanging it, his expression unreadable. Moving on from ranch work, he asked. Expanding, she corrected, suddenly nervous. I'll still handle your repairs, of course. First priority as promised. He studied the sign, then her face. Good, you need your own place. He pulled something from his pocket, a small, leather-bound ledger. "For your accounts. Proper business needs proper books." The gift was practical, unsentimental, and somehow perfect. "Thank you. Grand opening tomorrow." "Hardly grand, but yes." "I'll spread the word among the hands. They've been complaining about the walk to the ranch just to get a shirt mended." He left with his usual abruptness, but Lydia clutched the ledger to her chest, smiling. In his own way, Cade was ensuring her success. Opening day dawned clear and hot. Lydia arranged and rearranged her supplies, smoothed her dress repeatedly, and tried to calm her nerves. Ruth bustled in with coffee and encouragement. "Stop fretting. You've proven yourself 10 times over." But would the town give her a real chance? The question gnawed at her as 9 o'clock approached. Her first customer was unexpected Sarah Crow Nathaniel's wife. The young woman entered hesitantly, a bundle in her arms. Up close, Lydia could see she was pretty, but tired, with the pinched look of someone perpetually anxious. "Mrs. Crow," Lydia said carefully. "Miss Cather, I heard you do fine work." She unwrapped the bundle to reveal an elaborate writing habit. "It was my mother's. The moths got to it and I wondered—" Lydia examined the damage, extensive but not impossible. "I can repair this. It will take time to match the original stitching." "I don't mind waiting." Sarah twisted her hands. "It's the only thing of hers I have left." Something in her voice made Lydia soften. This girl wasn't her enemy, just another woman trying to make the best of her circumstances. 2 weeks, Lydia promised. "I'll make it beautiful again." Sarah's relief was palpable. As she turned to leave, she paused. "My husband? He mentioned he knew you before, in Kansas." Lydia's chest tightened, but not from her condition. "Briefly, through correspondence." "I see." Sarah's smile was sad and knowing. "Well, I'm glad you found your way here, Miss Cather. Not all of us get a second chance." She left before Lydia could respond, but the interaction stayed with her all morning. By noon, she'd had a steady stream of customers, cowboys with torn shirts, a mother with children's clothes to be let out, even Mrs. Davies sheepishly returning with the dress orders she'd canceled. She was pinning a hem when raised voices from the street made her look up. Through the window, she saw Cade facing down 3 men she didn't recognize. They wore city clothes and hard expressions. "Final offer, Mercer. Take it or we'll make things difficult." "Already told you no." Cade's voice carried clearly. "Ranch isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." "Not everything. Now get off my property." One of the men stepped closer, aggressive. "This town's changing, Mercer. Railroad's coming through whether you like it or not. You can profit from it or get run over by it." "I'll take my chances." The man's laugh was ugly. "Your funeral, but don't say we didn't try the friendly way first." They stalked off, leaving Cade standing alone in the street. He turned and caught Lydia watching through the window. For a moment, his controlled expression cracked, showing worry beneath. He entered the shop, removing his hat. "Sorry about the disturbance." "Who were they?" "Atlantic and Western Railroad representatives. They want to run a line through Dust Hollow. Need my land for the depot and yards." "But you said no." "Ranch has been in my family for 30 years. I'm not selling to make some Eastern investors rich." He ran a hand through his hair. "They'll be back, with lawyers next time or worse." "What will you do?" "Fight it. Towns divided, half want the prosperity a railroad would bring, half know it would change everything and not for the better." He looked around her shop, taking in the tidy shelves, the work in progress. "You're building something good here." "It's just a small shop." "It's roots," he corrected. "Deep ones, the kind that matter." Their eyes held for a moment before the bell above the door chimed. Mrs. Henderson entered with an armload of children's clothes, breaking the spell. Cade touched his hat brim. "Ma'am, I'll leave you to your business." Lydia watched him go, worry gnawing at her. She'd learned enough about frontier justice to know the railroad men's threat wasn't idle. But she had customers to tend and work to complete. Whatever storm was coming, she'd face it when it arrived. That evening, she sat in her shop as the sun set, updating her new ledger. The first day's earnings were modest, but real. She'd made enough to pay Ruth a week's rent and set aside a small amount for supplies. A soft knock interrupted her calculations. Cade stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. "Closed for the day," she said, but without heat. "Not here for repairs." He entered, seeming to fill the small space. "Wanted to apologize again for earlier, and to warn you, things might get unpleasant around here. Because of the railroad. Because money changes people, makes them choose sides. You're new trying to establish yourself. I don't want you caught in the crossfire." She set down her pen. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm not going anywhere. These roots you mentioned, I'm growing them too. Even if it gets dangerous. Life's dangerous for someone like me, anywhere. At least here I have—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. "What?" His voice was soft. "A chance. Work. Purpose." She met his eyes. "Friends. Is that what we are, friends?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither seemed ready to explore. Finally, Cade nodded slowly. "Friends look out for each other, so be careful. Lock your doors at night. If anyone gives you trouble, send word. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, but you don't have to do it alone." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You did good today. The shop, I mean. Margaret would have liked knowing the space was being used well." Then he was gone, leaving Lydia alone with her ledger, and the growing certainty that whatever was building between them was as dangerous as any railroad scheme. She locked the door carefully as he'd advised, then climbed the stairs to her room. From her window, she could see his tall figure heading back toward the ranch, shoulders set against troubles she was only beginning to understand. The railroad men wanted to change Dust Hollow. The town was already choosing sides. And she, the outsider who'd arrived with nothing, was somehow part of it now. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, she felt a fierce protectiveness for this place that had given her a second chance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, mending to finish customers to serve perhaps more trouble from the railroad. But tonight she had a shop with her name on it, coins in her purse earned by her own skill, and the strange, sweet ache of knowing someone was looking out for her. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but increasingly Lydia couldn't imagine wanting any other. The Atlantic and Western Railroad Company didn't wait long to escalate their campaign. Within a week, their representatives had established an office in the abandoned bank building, complete with maps showing the proposed rail line cutting directly through Cade's ranch and several other properties. Lydia watched the town transform as promises of prosperity were dangled before the citizens. The railroad offered jobs, connections to larger markets, and progress. For a struggling frontier town, it was a siren song. "They're offering 3 times the land value," Mrs. Davies told her while picking up a repaired dress. "My husband says we'd be fools not to consider it." Similar conversations echoed throughout her shop. The divide Cade had predicted was becoming a chasm. Families who'd been neighbors for decades now eyed each other with suspicion. Mayor Hutchins called a town meeting for Saturday evening. Lydia debated attending. She'd only been in Dust Hollow a few months, hardly long enough to have a voice. But Ruth insisted. "You're part of this town now, child. Your opinion matters." The meeting hall was packed, the air thick with tobacco smoke and tension. Lydia found a seat near the back, trying to remain inconspicuous. Cade stood against the far wall with several other ranchers, his expression carved from stone. Harrison Wells, the lead railroad representative, took the floor first. Smooth-voiced and well-dressed, he painted a picture of Dust Hollow's glorious future. A bustling depot, hotels, new businesses, prosperity for all. "Resistance to progress is natural," he said, his eyes finding Cade. "But those who stand in the way of the future often find themselves trampled by it." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others uneasy. When Cade's turn came to speak, he didn't move to the front. His voice carried from where he stood. "My family built this town alongside yours. We've weathered drought storms and hardships together. Now they want us to sell that history for promises." He paused, scanning faces. "Ask yourselves, when the railroad's done taking what it wants, what happens to those who can't afford their new prosperity? Where do the small ranchers go when the land prices triple? Where do your children raise their families when Dust Hollow becomes just another depot town? Where's the profit in staying poor? Someone shouted. There's a difference between poor and free, Cade responded. One you can change with hard work. The other, once you sell it, you never get back. The debate raged for 2 hours. When Mayor Hutchins finally called for a preliminary vote just to gauge the town's leanings, the result was devastating. Nearly 2/3 favored negotiating with the railroad. Lydia watched Cade's face as the count was announced. Something flickered there, not surprise, but a deep sadness. He left without speaking to anyone. She found herself following, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. He was already mounted on his horse when she reached the street. Cade, wait! He turned in the saddle, his face shadowed by his hat. You should be inside. Not safe to walk alone with tensions this high. I'm sorry about the vote. It's not over, but his voice held little conviction. Go inside, Lydia, please. The please decided her. Instead of obeying, she stepped closer. You can't fight this alone. I'm not asking anyone to stand with me. Too much to lose. And if some of us choose to stand anyway. He dismounted, then leading his horse closer. In the dim light from the meeting hall windows, she could see the weight he carried in every line of his body. You've built something good here. Don't risk it for a fight that's probably already lost. You don't believe that? No. The admission seemed pulled from him. But believing and winning are different things. She reached out impulsively, touching his hand where it gripped the reins. Then teach us to fight. Show us what to do. You're not the only one who loves this place. His hand turned, catching hers. For a moment they stood connected in the darkness, the distant sounds of the still arguing crowd, a reminder of the battle ahead. You don't know what you're offering, he said quietly. I know exactly what I'm offering. The question is whether you're too proud to accept help. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Margaret used to say the same thing. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. All right. Sunday after church. Bring Ruth and anyone else who wants to listen. We'll figure out a strategy. He mounted again, touching his hat brim before riding off. Lydia stood in the street, her hand still warm from his touch, wondering what she'd just committed herself to. The answer came sooner than expected. Monday morning, she arrived at her shop to find the window broken glass scattered across her clean floor. A note was tucked between the remaining shards. Railroad's coming, smart folks get on board. She was still sweeping glass when Cade arrived, Tom and 2 other ranch hands behind him. He took in the damage, his jaw tightening. Pack your things. You're moving to the ranch until... No. She kept sweeping, proud when her hands didn't shake. I'm not running. Lydia. Would you run? If they broke your window, would you abandon your ranch? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Tom, board up that window. Sam checked the other shops, see if anyone else had trouble. As the men worked, Cade helped her finish cleaning the glass. Neither spoke, but his presence steadied her. When they finished, he studied her face. You're sure about this? It's likely to get worse before it gets better. I'm sure. She met his eyes. I told you I'm growing roots here. Nobody's pulling them up without a fight. All right. He moved to the door, then paused. Lock up at sundown. No working late until this is settled. Cade. She waited until he turned. Thank you for not insisting. Wouldn't do any good. You're as stubborn as... He stopped, shaking his head. Just be careful. The week that followed tested everyone's resolve. More windows were broken always at properties owned by railroad opponents. Fences were cut, letting livestock wander. The sheriff, clearly in the railroad's pocket, found no evidence worth pursuing. But resistance was building too. The Sunday strategy meeting at Cade's ranch drew 20 people, then 30 the following week. They organized patrols, documented every incident, wrote letters to territorial authorities. Lydia found herself at the center of it, her shop becoming an unofficial headquarters. She kept working, mending clothes, repairing leather, maintaining the normal rhythm of life, even as everything shifted around her. One evening, as she prepared to close early per Cade's constant reminders, Sarah Crow appeared at her door. I shouldn't be here, Sarah said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Nathaniel's at the saloon with the railroad men. Come in. Lydia locked the door behind her. What's wrong? I heard them talking, planning. They're going to do something to Mr. Mercer's horses. Tonight, to force him to sell. Lydia's blood went cold. Cade's horses were his life, his legacy, his connection to Margaret. You're certain? They were drinking boasting. Nathaniel laughed about it. Sarah's voice was bitter. I know he's my husband, but this isn't right. None of it. Lydia gripped Sarah's hands. You did the right thing. I'll warn Cade. Don't tell him I won't. But Sarah, thank you. After Sarah slipped away, Lydia faced a dilemma. The ranch was half a mile out, and darkness was falling. Cade's warnings about safety echoed in her mind. But his horses? She made her decision, grabbing her shawl and the small pistol Ruth had insisted she carry. The streets were emptying shadows, lengthening. She walked quickly, trying to look purposeful rather than afraid. She was halfway to the ranch when hoofbeats made her heart stutter. But it was Tom who rounded the corner, relief flooding his face when he saw her. Miss Lydia Cade sent me to check on you. What are you doing out here? They're planning something tonight. The horses? Tom's expression hardened. Get on. He pulled her up behind him without ceremony, wheeling the horse toward the ranch. They arrived to organized chaos. Cade was directing men to defensive positions, rifles in hand. He turned at their approach, and she saw genuine fear flash across his face before it was replaced by anger. What were you thinking? They're after the horses, she interrupted. Tonight, I had reliable information. His anger transformed to sharp focus. How many? I don't know, but soon. He lifted her down from Tom's horse, his hands lingering on her waist. You risked yourself to warn me. You would have done the same. Yes, he said quietly. I would have. Then louder, Tom, take Miss Cather to the house. Mary's there with the children. Guard them. I can help. You already have. Now let me protect what's mine. His eyes held hers. All of it. The weight of that look stayed with her as Tom escorted her to the house. Through the windows, she watched men take positions protecting not just property, but a way of life. The attack came near midnight riders with torches intending to fire the barns and scatter the horses in the chaos. But they met prepared defenders instead of sleeping victims. Gunfire crackled across the prairie flashes in the darkness. It was over in minutes. The attackers fled, leaving behind one man nursing a wounded shoulder. The sheriff arrived conveniently after the danger passed, forced to arrest the wounded man when dozens of witnesses gave statements. Dawn was breaking when Cade finally entered the house. Soot-stained and exhausted, he found Lydia in the kitchen making coffee with shaking hands. It's over, he said. For now. She turned, and something in her expression made him cross the room in 2 strides. He caught her as her knees buckled, the night's fear finally catching up. I thought... She couldn't finish. I know. His arms tightened around her. But we're all safe, thanks to you. She pulled back enough to see his face. We're not done fighting, are we? No, but we showed them tonight. We're not easy prey. He touched her cheek gently. You showed them. Railroad men don't expect opposition from seamstresses. This seamstress has thorns. She managed winning a real smile from him. Yes, he agreed, something warm and proud in his voice. She does. The failed attack on Cade's ranch had shifted the tide of public opinion. The arrested man, eager to avoid prison, testified that the railroad company had paid him and others to intimidate landowners. Suddenly, those who'd been eager for progress began questioning what kind of progress required burning barns and threatening neighbors. Mayor Hutchins called another meeting. This time, when Lydia entered the hall, she noticed the different energy. People nodded to her, some with respect, others with gratitude. Word had spread about her midnight warning. Sit with us, Martha called, patting the bench beside her. No longer was Lydia relegated to the back corners. Harrison Wells looked less polished than before his smooth confidence cracked. He tried to distance the railroad from the attack, claiming overzealous individuals had acted without authority. Few believed him. When the floor opened for comments, Lydia surprised herself by standing. Her chest tightened from nerves, not her condition, but she forced herself to speak. "Many of you know I came here seeking a new life," she began, her voice stronger than expected. "I was desperate, alone with nothing but hope. This town gave me a chance, not charity, a chance to work to build something." She looked around the room, finding familiar faces. "The railroad promises prosperity, but prosperity for whom it do? But for Sarah Crow, who'll lose her home to development. Not for the Martinez family whose children play in fields marked for rail yards. Not for any of us who've built lives here." "Pretty words," Wells interrupted. "But progress demands sacrifice." "Whose sacrifice?" Lydia shot back. "Yours or ours?" She turned back to the crowd. "I've lived where money rules everything, where people become numbers on ledgers. Is that the dust hollow you want your children to inherit?" She sat down to applause, her heart hammering. Across the room, Cade's eyes found hers, pride evident in his expression. The debate continued, but the outcome felt different this time. When Mayor Hutchins called for a vote on whether to continue negotiations with Atlantic and Western, the measure failed decisively. Wells stormed out, pausing at the door. "This isn't over. The railroad will come with or without your cooperation." "Then it'll be without," Cade said quietly, but his words carried. As the meeting dispersed, people stopped to thank Lydia. Mrs. Davies squeezed her hand. "You said what we were feeling but couldn't express." Outside, Cade waited by his horse. "That was well done." "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." He adjusted his hat. "Walk with me?" They strolled down Main Street, the evening air cool after the packed hall. For a while, neither spoke comfortable in shared victory. "They'll try again," Cade finally said. "Legal challenges, probably. Territory judges can be bought." "Then we'll fight that too." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You keep saying we. Is that wrong?" "No, just—" He seemed to struggle for words. "I've been fighting alone for so long. It's strange having someone beside me." "Get used to it." The words came out more forcefully than intended. "I mean, if you want." "I want." His response was immediate. Then he seemed to catch himself. "The town needs united leadership." "Of course. The town." But something in the air between them suggested they were discussing more than civic matters. They resumed walking, reaching her shop. The boarded window had been replaced thanks to donations from grateful neighbors. Evidence that she truly belonged here now. "Lock up early," Cade said automatically, then smiled at her expression. "Old habits. I'll be careful, but I won't live in fear." "I know." He touched his hat brim, started to leave, then turned back. "Lydia, what you did that night riding out alone to warn me, don't do it again. If the same situation arose—" "I mean it." His voice roughened. "I've lost enough to this land. I won't lose—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You won't lose what?" she asked softly. But he was already mounting his horse the moment broken. "Good night, Miss Cather." She watched him ride away, frustration and something warmer warring in her chest. How long would they dance around whatever was building between them? The answer came unexpectedly the next afternoon. She was working on Sarah Crow's riding habit, nearly restored to its former glory, when commotion erupted outside. Through the window, she saw people running toward the church. Ruth burst through the door. "It's Cade. His horse came back without him." The words hit Lydia like cold water. She dropped the fabric, following Ruth into the street. A crowd had gathered around Cade's stallion, its saddle askew, reins trailing. "Could have thrown him," Tom was saying. "That lightning storm last night spooked all the horses." "Or the railroad made another move," someone else suggested darkly. Lydia pushed through the crowd to examine the horse. No blood, thank God, but the saddle had shifted oddly, suggesting a sudden movement or fall. "Where would he have been riding?" she asked Tom. "North pasture, checking the herd there, but that's rough country, canyons and rock falls." Without conscious decision, Lydia found herself moving. "Saddle a horse. I'm going with you." "Miss Lydia." "I know those canyons. I've ridden with him before." A lie, but delivered with such conviction that Tom didn't question it. "We're wasting time." Within minutes, a search party formed. Lydia changed into her riding skirt, one of the few practical purchases she'd made with her earnings. The horse Tom provided was gentle, but sure-footed. They rode hard, spreading out once they reached the broken country. Lydia found herself paired with Tom scanning ravines and washouts. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust coated her throat. "Miss Lydia," Tom said after an hour of searching, "can you handle checking that narrow canyon? I'll circle around, meet you on the other side." She nodded, guiding her horse into the shadowed cleft. The walls rose steeply on either side, loose rocks suggesting recent movement. Her breathing tightened, whether from dust or fear she couldn't tell. Then she saw him. Cade lay motionless at the base of a scree slope, his hat nearby, one leg bent at an awkward angle. Her heart stopped, then resumed at double pace. "Cade!" She dismounted clumsily, stumbling over rocks to reach him. "Cade, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open as she knelt beside him. "Lydia!" Confusion, then alarm. "What are you... how..." "Hush! How badly are you hurt?" "Legs broken. Maybe ribs. Horse spooked at a rattler." He tried to sit up, grimaced. "You shouldn't be here." "Yet here I am." She called out for Tom, her voice echoing off canyon walls. "Can you move?" "With help." His hand found hers. "You came looking." "Of course I did." "Lydia." His eyes, clouded with pain, still managed to convey depths of emotion. "I need to tell you." "Later." Tom's answering call cut her off. "Save your strength." But his grip on her hand tightened. "No, in case I need you to know. That night at dinner on the porch, I wanted to kiss you." Heat that had nothing to do with exertion flooded her cheeks. "Cade." "Been wanting to since that first day, if I'm honest. But I thought, Margaret, it felt like betrayal. And now I think she'd call me a fool for waiting." His thumb brushed her knuckles. "A man gets thrown from his horse, lies there wondering if he'll be found, and all he can think about is words unspoken." Tom's arrival interrupted whatever response she might have made. Together they fashioned a rough splint for Cade's leg and got him onto Tom's steadier horse. The ride back was slow agony for Cade physically, for Lydia emotionally. His words echoed with each hoofbeat. He'd wanted to kiss her. The proper response was probably scandal or maidenly protest. Instead, she felt only a fierce gladness that he was alive to tell her. Doc Harmon confirmed the broken leg and cracked ribs. Nothing life-threatening, but Cade would be laid up for weeks. They installed him in Ruth's boarding house over his protests. "Need to watch the ranch." "Tom and the boys can handle it," Ruth said firmly. "You need proper nursing, and that house of yours is too far for daily doctor visits." Lydia said nothing, but she'd already rearranged her work schedule to allow for frequent visits to his room. If anyone found it improper, they kept their opinions to themselves. That evening, after Doc Harmon left and Ruth was busy with dinner, Lydia brought Cade water and helped him drink. He was pale, but alert, studying her face as if memorizing it. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "In the canyon." "I know." She set the glass aside, gathering courage. "I've wanted the same. Since that day in the storm, maybe before." His breath caught nothing to do with broken ribs. "Lydia!" "But you were right to wait." She managed a small smile. "We both had healing to do first. And now?" "Now." She leaned down, pressing her lips gently to his forehead. "Now we have time. You're not going anywhere for weeks." "Woman," he said, but his eyes were warm. "Using a man's injuries against him." "Rest," she commanded, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow we'll discuss the ranch operations. Someone needs to make decisions while you're imprisoned here." "Lydia," she turned back. "Thank you for finding me, for..." He gestured helplessly. "Everything." "Always," she said simply and meant it. As she descended the stairs, she found Ruth waiting with a knowing smile. "Don't say it," Lydia warned. "Wouldn't dream of it." But Ruth's expression suggested volumes. "Though I might mention that Margaret Mercer was my friend, she'd be glad to see Cade looking at someone that way again." The blessing, unexpected and freely given, brought tears to Lydia's eyes. She squeezed Ruth's hand and went to tend her shop heart lighter despite the day's fears. Outside, Dust Hollow continued its evening routines. But something had shifted, like the earth settling after a tremor. The railroad fight wasn't over, might never be truly over. But they'd stand together now, all of them. And she and Cade, well, that was its own journey just beginning. The night Cade disappeared again started like any other. He'd been recuperating at the boarding house for 2 weeks, growing increasingly restless as his body healed. Lydia had spent the evening with him going over ranch accounts and trying to distract him from his forced inactivity. "I should be out there," he muttered for the dozenth time, shifting uncomfortably in bed. "Spring roundup's coming." "Tom has everything under control," she assured him, adjusting his pillows. "Your only job is to heal." He caught her hand as she fussed with the blankets. "Stay a while longer." "Cade, it's already past 9. People will talk." "Let them." But he released her hand, respecting the boundaries they'd carefully maintained despite their growing closeness. "You're right. Good night, Lydia." "Good night." She touched his cheek briefly, then left, already planning tomorrow's visit. But when morning came, his room was empty. Ruth discovered it first, raising the alarm when she brought his breakfast. The bed showed signs of struggle, not violent, but hasty departure. The window stood open, curtains fluttering in the dawn breeze. "He can barely walk," Ruth said, wringing her hands. "Where would he go?" Lydia's mind raced. Then, like cold water down her spine, realization hit. The meeting. There was supposed to be a meeting last night. What meeting? The ranchers. They were gathering to discuss the railroad's latest legal maneuver. Cade insisted on being told the outcome. Her throat tightened, not from her condition, from fear. What if something went wrong? What if they took him? Tom arrived within minutes of being summoned, his face grave. 4 ranchers didn't come home last night. Their families are searching. The railroad. Or someone wanting us to think so. He ran a hand through his hair. Miss Lydia, the boss, left something. Said if anything happened, I should give it to you. He handed her an envelope, her name in Cade's careful script, inside a single sheet. Asterisk Lydia. If you're reading this, something's gone sideways. Trust Tom. Keep the ranch running. The railroad's more desperate than we thought. Remember what I said in the canyon? Always Cade. She read it twice, her hands trembling. He knew something might happen. What do we do? Ruth asked. Lydia folded the letter carefully, steel entering her spine. We find them. Tom, gather the men. Search teams, but smart ones. This feels like a trap. You think they want us to come looking? I think they want us frightened and scattered. She moved to the window, studying the marks on the sill. But they didn't count on one thing. What's that? She turned back, and Tom stepped back at her expression. They didn't count on me. Within an hour, she'd transformed the boarding house dining room into a command center. Maps spread across tables, riders dispatched with messages, women organized to maintain normal town routines, while men searched. We can't appear panicked, she told the gathered wives. That's what they want. Keep your shops open, your children in school. Show them we won't be intimidated. Sarah Crow slipped in during the planning, pale but determined. Nathaniel didn't come home either. The room went quiet. Lydia studied the younger woman's face, reading truth there. Do you think he's involved? I don't know. Maybe. He's been drinking, more angry about money. Sarah's voice dropped. He mentioned the railroad paying debts for useful people. Another piece of the puzzle. Lydia assigned search areas, keeping her voice calm despite the storm inside. When the room emptied, only Tom remained. You're thinking like a general, he observed. I'm thinking like someone who won't lose him. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Tom's weathered face softened. We'll find them, Miss Lydia. Cade's tougher than raw leather. But his injuries make him meaner, not weaker. Trust me, I've known him 20 years. She wanted to believe that. But as the day wore on, with no word, fear gnawed at her. She kept working, mending with mechanical precision, serving customers with forced smiles, maintaining the facade of normalcy. At sunset, a rider approached fast. Lydia recognized young Sam from the ranch and ran to meet him. "Found tracks," he gasped. "North toward the old mine, wagon wheels and horses, maybe 6 hours old. The abandoned garrison mine, perfect for hiding people or disposing of them." Lydia's blood chilled. "How many men can we gather?" "Maybe a dozen if we pull everyone in." Not enough if it was a trap. But waiting meant losing darkness's cover. She made the decision that would haunt her regardless of outcome. "We go now, quietly." They rode under a sliver moon Lydia on the gentle mare she'd grown comfortable with. She'd changed into her riding skirt and borrowed a coat that smelled of leather and horses. Tom tried once to convince her to stay behind. The look she gave him ended that discussion. The mine entrance yawned like a mouth in the hillside. No guards visible, which worried her more than armed men would have. Tom signaled for silence as they dismounted. Then they heard voices from deep inside, angry ones. "Told you grabbing Mercer was stupid. Man's got a broken leg, for Christ's sake. Wells wanted leverage. We got it. We got a wounded man and 3 ranchers ready to string us up first chance they get." Lydia's relief nearly buckled her knees. Alive. Cade was alive. Tom organized the approach with hand signals. They'd have to go in careful cornered men made desperate decisions. But as they crept closer, unexpected help arrived. From inside the mine came a crash, then shouting, "He's loose! Grab him!" More crashes, a gunshot that echoed off stone walls. Then Cade's voice rough but strong. "Come on then, let's finish this." The chaos provided perfect cover. Tom and the others rushed in while the kidnappers were distracted. Lydia held back knowing she'd be liability in a fight. But when men began stumbling out, some fleeing, others driven by Tom's group, she was ready with the rope they'd brought. The fight was brief but vicious. When it ended, 4 railroad thugs sat trussed like calves, and the missing ranchers emerged battered but whole. Last came Cade, supported between Tom and another hand, his face pale in the moonlight, but eyes blazing with life. "You damn fool," was all Lydia managed before her voice broke. "Hey now," he said softly. "I'm all right." "Your leg?" "Re-broken, probably. Worth it to see Matthew's face when I hit him with that timber." Despite everything, he was actually smiling. "You organized this rescue." "Someone had to. You were busy playing hero." "Lydia." The way he said her name stopped her scolding. "You magnificent woman." Heat flooded her cheeks, but there was no time for whatever might have followed. They needed to get the injured home and the criminals to proper authority, not the local sheriff, but territorial marshals Tom had wisely summoned. The ride back was slow, Cade sharing a horse with Tom to spare his leg. Lydia rode beside them, close enough to touch, needing the reassurance of his presence. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why take you when you were already injured?" "Desperation. The failed vote, the arrests Wells is losing control. Figured if they had me, others would fold." He shifted, grimacing. "Didn't count on you." "I told you. We stand together now." "No." He reached out, fingers brushing hers. "You stood. You led. You saved us all." Dawn was breaking as they reached Dust Hollow. The town had been alerted. Doc Harmon waited with his bag, Ruth with blankets and scolding. The captured men were locked in the jail's actually secure cells to await the marshals. As Doc Harmon reset Cade's leg with colorful cursing from the patient, Lydia finally allowed exhaustion to claim her. She slumped in the chair beside his bed, still wearing her dusty riding clothes. "Sleep," Cade told her when the doctor left. "You've more than earned it. Someone should watch you. Make sure you don't escape again." "I'm not going anywhere." He caught her hand thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Never again without you knowing." The promise in those words warmed her more than any blanket. She squeezed his fingers, then let her eyes drift closed. When she woke hours later, she was covered with a quilt, and Cade was watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Trying to figure out how I got lucky enough to have Lydia Cather fighting for me." "Someone has to keep you from your own stubbornness." "Marry me." The words hung in the air like struck bells. Lydia's breath caught her condition had nothing to do with it. Cade, I mean it. When this railroad business is done, when I can stand proper to ask marry me, build a life with me, let me spend every day showing you that you're not a burden, you're a blessing. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You're asking now, like this, with a broken leg and probably a fever. I'm asking with a clear head and a full heart. His grip on her hand tightened. What do you say? She thought of all the reasons to say no too fast, too complicated, too much unsettled. Then she thought of searching for him, of the terror of potentially losing him, of the way he looked at her like she was everything. Ask me again, she said softly. When you can kneel properly. When the railroad's gone and we're not running on fear and relief. Is that a yes? She leaned down, pressing her lips to his soft, sweet full of promise. That's a wait and see. I'll take it, he murmured against her mouth. I'm good at waiting for worthwhile things. Ruth cleared her throat from the doorway. The marshals are here, and half the town's asking about you both. Reality intruded, but somehow felt less sharp. Whatever came next, legal battles, railroad schemes, uncertain futures, they'd face it together. Not officially, not yet. But the promise was there, solid as leather, stitching, strong as prairie wind. Ready? Cade asked. Lydia straightened her shoulders, smoothed her dusty skirts, and smiled. Always. 6 weeks later, Cade could finally walk without a crutch. The territorial marshals had done their work. Arrests were made. The Atlantic and Western Railroad Company faced federal investigation for their tactics. And Harrison Wells had fled to avoid prosecution. Dust Hollow breathed easier, though everyone knew the railroad issue would resurface someday. Just not today. Lydia stood in her shop, pinning the final adjustments to Sarah Crow's riding habit. The restoration was complete, every moth hole invisibly mended, every worn seam reinforced. Sarah ran her fingers over the fabric with wonder. It's perfect, better than when Mother wore it. Her eyes misted. You've given me back a piece of her. I'm glad. Lydia stepped back, admiring her work. How are things at home? Sarah's smile faltered. Nathaniel's gone, left with the railroad men when the arrest started. His creditors took the house, but... She straightened. The church is letting me stay in their spare room in exchange for teaching Sunday school. It's a new start. If you need work, I'd like to learn. To sew, I mean. To have a skill that's mine. Lydia gripped Sarah's hands. Come by tomorrow. We'll start with simple mending. After Sarah left, Lydia closed the shop early. She had somewhere to be. The ride to Cade's ranch was familiar now, each landmark a friend. The spring air carried wildflower scents and the promise of rain. She found him where she expected, working with a young colt in the training pen, moving carefully but steadily. He looked up at her approach, and his smile made her heart skip. You're early. Couldn't wait. She dismounted, tying her mare to the rail. How's the leg? Good as new. Doc Harmon cleared me yesterday. For all activities. All activities. His eyes held promises that made her blush. Why? No reason. She entered the pen, approaching the nervous colt with slow movements. He's beautiful. Best of the spring crop. Reminds me of his grandfather Margaret's favorite stallion. They worked together in comfortable silence, Lydia holding the lead while Cade ran his hands over the colt's legs, checking for problems. The sun painted everything golden, and she found herself memorizing the moment, the smell of horse and leather, the feel of warm air, the sight of Cade's capable hands gentling the young animal. Lydia. She looked up to find him watching her intently. Yes. It's been 6 weeks. Since I asked a question, you told me to repeat when I could kneel properly. He handed the lead rope to Tom, who'd appeared as if summoned. Come with me. He led her to the porch, the same one where they'd stood during that first dinner. The view stretched endlessly, but Lydia only had eyes for the man who slowly, carefully lowered himself to one knee. Cade, your leg. Is fine. Hush. He pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band that caught the light. Lydia Cather, you came to this town with nothing but hope. You've built a business, earned respect, and saved my stubborn hide more than once. You've shown me that hearts can heal and love can grow even in the harshest soil. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. I'm not offering you an easy life. The ranch is hard work. The town will always have its troubles, and I'm set in my ways. But I'm offering you partnership. My hands beside yours, my strength when you need it, my arms when you can't breathe. His voice roughened. Will you marry me? Will you help me make this place a home again? Yes, the word escaped on a sob. Yes, Cade, always yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her. Not the careful touches they'd shared before, but something deeper, full of promise and passion, and the future stretching before them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Lydia. Should have said it sooner. I love you too, stubborn, heroic fool that you are. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Come inside. There's something else. The house felt different as he led her through it, not a shrine to the past, but a space waiting for the future. He stopped at a closed door she'd never seen opened. This was Margaret's sewing room, he said quietly. I couldn't, but now. He opened the door. Sunlight flooded a beautiful space. Large windows, built-in shelves, a cutting table positioned to catch the best light. Dusty but perfect. Cade, she breathed. Thought you might want to work here sometimes. When the shop's closed. When you want quiet. He rubbed his neck, suddenly uncertain. If it's too much. She silenced him with another kiss. It's perfect. You're perfect. Far from it, but I'm yours. The wedding took place 3 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon that threatened rain but delivered sunshine. The whole town attended, cramming into the little church and spilling onto the grounds. Ruth stood as Lydia's witness, tears streaming down her weathered face. Tom supported Cade, grinning broadly. Reverend Mills kept the ceremony simple as requested. But when he reached the vows, Cade departed from script. Lydia, he said, ignoring the Reverend's prompt. You asked me once why I helped you that first day. Truth is, I saw something in you, strength disguised as struggle steel wrapped in silk. You've made me remember that life's for living, not just surviving. I promise to support your dreams, guard your health, and spend every day grateful that you chose to build your life with mine. Lydia's carefully prepared words fled. Instead, she spoke from her heart. Cade, you saw me not as a burden, but as a person. You gave me work when I needed purpose, protection, when I needed safety and love, when I'd forgotten I deserved it. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes to make our home a haven, and to never let you forget that you're worthy of all the happiness we'll build together. When Reverend Mills pronounced them married, the kiss they shared brought cheers from the congregation. Even the cowboys whooped, earning a stern look from the Reverend that fooled no one. The reception filled the church grounds with music and laughter. Tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes. The territorial marshal, who'd stayed to ensure the railroad truly retreated, raised a toast to the couple who saved Dust Hollow. As evening approached, Cade and Lydia slipped away to the ranch. Their ranch now. The house waited, windows glowing in the sunset, flowers blooming in Margaret's carefully tended boxes. No regrets, Cade asked as he lifted her down from the wagon. Only that it took so long to get here. He carried her over the threshold despite her protests about his leg. Inside, she found he'd made small changes, new curtains she'd admired in town, a rocking chair positioned by the window, fresh flowers in every room. When did you... I've had 6 weeks to prepare. He set her down gently, keeping his arms around her. Wanted it perfect for you. It is. You are. She touched his face, marveling that this was real. Though I do have one question. What's that? What name should I put on my shop sign? L. Mercer doesn't have quite the same ring. He laughed, spinning her around the parlor. Whatever you choose, though I'm partial to Mercer's Miraculous Mending. Terrible alliteration. The Dusty Needle. Worse. But she was laughing, too giddy with joy. They settled eventually on the porch, watching the stars emerge. The night air was cool, but Cade's arms kept her warm. Her breathing was easy, her heart full. What are you thinking? He asked. That I came here to marry a stranger and start over. Instead, I found myself fought a railroad and fell in love with the most wonderful man in the territory. Only the territory. She pretended to consider. Well, I haven't traveled extensively. He tickled her ribs, making her squeal. I'll show you wonderful, Mrs. Mercer. I'm counting on it, Mr. Mercer. They sat in comfortable silence, planning their future. The shop would stay open. Lydia insisted on maintaining her independence. The ranch would expand. Cade had plans for a breeding program. They'd face challenges, certainly. The railroad would return eventually, the town would continue changing, and life would bring its share of storms. But tonight, with his ring on her finger and his heart in her keeping, Lydia Mercer, née Cather, couldn't imagine wanting any life but this one. She'd traveled west, seeking survival, and found so much more. Cade, she said softly. Thank you for carrying me in from the street that day. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Thank you for being worth carrying. Are you going to go sentimental on me now? Maybe. You'll have years to get used to it. Years, she repeated, savoring the word. I like the sound of that. Forever, he corrected. However long that gives us. Forever, then. She turned in his arms, sealing the promise with a kiss. Starting now. The stars wheeled overhead, the prairie stretched endlessly, and in a house that had known sorrow, joy bloomed again. Two hearts both scarred but healing beat in rhythm. And in Dust Hollow, where the dust never quite settled and the future remained unwritten, Cade and Lydia Mercer began their greatest adventure, a life built together, one breath one day, one forever at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Lydia and Cade's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more listeners discover this heartfelt tale of love blooming in the dusty frontier.